Well, I did say that we're going to be speaking with the regulator itself, that's the political umpire, and right now we're joined by Mr. Festus Okoye, who is the National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee at the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. Sometimes it's very good to remind yourself of what the acronym means. Good morning and welcome, Mr. Okoye.
Yeah, good morning.
I see you're all smiles this morning, almost like I see you're giving yourself a pat on the back. Did you really think that when you were going into the elections in Osun, had you already identified perhaps pitfalls that you might have experienced in Ekiti and tried to improve on them in Osun? If the answer is yes, what were those pitfalls?
Well, what we did was that we learned valuable lessons from some of the challenges and some of the issues arising from the Osun governorship election, from the Ekiti governorship election. One of the things we identified as the key factor in the success of the Ekiti governorship election was the early audit and deployment of election personnel and election materials. And we felt that going forward, that we should improve on our deployment. And that was why, as you can see, during the election, by 7:30, almost in over 95% of the polling units, the poll officials were already on ground waiting for the voters. So we felt that that was key to the success of Ekiti, and we wanted to emphasize that in relation to the Osun governorship election. Secondly, we felt that we needed to engage in more robust training of the ad hoc staff that were engaged for the conduct of the election. And so we gave them more training in terms of our processes and procedures, and also in terms of the use of our new technologies in the conduct of election. So that was also key. Thirdly, we engaged the National Union of Road Transport Workers in terms of their leadership, and we embedded their leadership within the confines of our own situation room, so that both at the state level and at the local government level, the moment we encountered any challenge with any of their drivers, they intervened decisively to sort out those challenges. So we identified key issues in relation to the Ekiti governorship election. Now, in terms of the size of our polling units, we identified that as one of the key issues that we need to even deal with going forward. In some of the polling units, we had polling units that had over 1,000 registered voters. So in some of those polling units, any polling unit that has over 750 registered voters, we deployed an additional beavers. Anyone that has up to 2,000 registered voters, we deploy 3. But going forward, that's one of the key issues we need to deal with in terms of equitable distribution of voters to polling units. But we need to conclude the CVR as quickly as possible so that we can have a clear idea of the number of persons we have in each polling unit, and then do this equitable distribution so that when we get to the 2023 general election, we are going to have not more than 750 registered voters in each polling unit.
CVR is a continuous voter registration.
Exactly.
And you haven't said, I know that INEC just said it's continuing for now. You haven't quite set a date as to when it's going to end, have you?
We've set a date. It's going to end on the 31st of July, 2022.
31st of July?
Yes, this month.
That's the end of this month?
Exactly.
So if you have not registered or moved your polling units by the end of this month, that's it?
That is it.
Okay, I hope that people are listening to that. But just as you've spoken now, logistics continues to stand out. For a number of people, they were wondering just how you were going to do it when you already said that you're not going to be keeping materials at the CBN. I think you started that with the Ekiti elections, and you have continued into the Osun elections. What challenges have that given you?
Well, you cannot use the Ekiti governorship election and the Osun governorship election as a measure of what will happen in 2023. This is because, for instance, in the Ekiti governorship election, we had less than 1 million registered voters. In the Osun governorship election, we were shy of 2 million registered voters. So these are smaller, these are standalone elections. Yes, for the Ekiti governorship election, we utilized the services of the Nigerian Air Force, and they flew the materials into Akure Airport. We did the same thing with the Osun governorship election, and then we moved these materials to our state offices. But for the 2023 general election, we are going to have over 95 million ballot papers printed for presidential election. Over 95 million ballot papers that will be printed for the senatorial election. Over 95 million ballot papers will be printed for House of Representative elections. And then it goes down. is going to be a huge logistic nightmare. And so what we intend to do going forward, since there were issues surrounding our keeping the materials with the central bank, we have not had an opportunity of sitting down with the central bank to review the entire issue surrounding our moving our materials with the Nigerian Air Force. We are definitely going to do that. If at the end of the day we are not satisfied with the arrangements, then we have to look for a new logistic pathway on how to manage logistics during the 2023 general election. But no decision has been taken, yes.
What you're saying is that the methods you used, or the arrangements you made for the Ekiti and Osun elections, will not be sustainable for the general election?
Definitely it will not. Because we use the Nigerian Air Force moved these materials from where they were printed to Akure Airport. This is one election. But when you have to move materials to 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, it's a completely different ball game. And the number of materials we are talking about, I'm saying 95 million ballot papers for presidential election, and you have to move resources, you have to move the beavers, and so on and so forth. And these are quite sensitive materials. So what we did in Ekiti and Osun in terms of the 2023 general election will not be sustainable, and we need to look for a completely different logistic pathway on how to deal with that particular problem.
Okay. Let me flip this conversation to Lagos, my colleagues.
Well, yeah, Mr. Kuya, I'm sure you heard one of the observers who saw what transpired in Osun, and he, I think, particularly zeroed in on one of the local government areas, how people were still voting up until 9 p.m. They didn't have enough beaver, so they thought that INEC need to address that. What is the current consideration about it?
Well, what I've just pointed out is that our own consideration was that we deployed over 5,000 beavers to Osun State. And we made it very clear that any polling unit that has more than 750 registered voters, we are going to deploy an additional beavers. Any polling unit that has over 2,000 registered voters, we will deploy an additional beavers, making it 3. Now, but the law and the regulations designed by the Independent National Electoral Commission is to the effect that in any place where voters are still on the queue after 2 p.m., that particular polling unit will not close until the last voter on the queue has voted. And that was exactly what we maintained throughout. And I have emphasized that, yes, we have some of our polling units that are still have over 1,000 registered voters. Some still have over 2,000 registered voters. The next phase of our planning and the next phase of our intervention is to break up some of these polling units by distributing voters equitably to the polling unit, especially polling units that are contiguous to each other. So that's the thing we are going to do now. But we need to complete the CVR as quickly as possible so that we can have a very clear idea of the number of voters in the newly created polling unit so that we can plan and plan well. So we identified that as one of the issues that we need to deal with before the 2023 general election. And we are definitely going to deal with that.
Especially now that you have given the commitment that there shouldn't be more than 750 voters per polling unit. So I imagine that that will be followed up. But a point you made earlier, I'll just quickly follow up on. So you said that it'll be a nightmare, essentially, to employ the mode which you use for Ekiti and Osun to, distribute the materials, 95 million of them for the general election. So essentially you're saying, since you can't go the way of having the aircraft, partner with the Air Force to fly, you have to fall back to the CBN.
Well, the point I have made is that, yes, there were challenges in relation to our keeping our materials with the CBN. We have not had the opportunity of sitting down with the management of the CBN to look at some of those issues, look at the variables involved, and also look at the trust issue that has arisen in relation to our keeping our materials with the central bank. We need to sit down with them, look at all those issues, get the necessary assurances in relation to the safety of our materials, in relation to the security of our materials, and also get the buy-in of Nigerians in relation to where we keep those materials. If at the end of the day, we are not satisfied with the assurances that has been given. The implication is that we have to look for a different logistic company or a different logistic pathway on how to deliver, on how to secure our materials after they come from the printers, and also how to deliver those materials to the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory on election day. So we are going to take that decision as quickly as possible with the Osun governorship election out of the way. But I want to assure you that the commission is a public trust, and we are going to also take into consideration the perspectives of Nigerians and the sensibility of Nigerians and the trust issue involved in keeping our sensitive materials, in coming to a final decision and a determination on what to do with our sensitive election materials.
Well, it'll be quite interesting to see how INEC, plays around that one, because I wonder who else or which other institution or company can handle such logistics aside the CBN. But we'll wait, as you say, and see the outcome. But still on logistics, we've seen over time that you employ or you work with the road transport unions to move, materials from place to place. And I mean, from what we have seen so far, the unions are usually, at least most of the time, they always have a preference for the incumbent, the government in power. We've seen that time and again. So how feasible is it to have the same road transport workers who are always, at least in partnership, I should say, for lack of a better term, with the government in power, to handle logistics?
Well, the National Union of Road Transport Workers is the union. They are not the transport owners, and they are not the drivers. So the arrangement we have is that we have MOU with the National Union of Road Transport Workers, both at the national level and at the state level. Now, on election day or before election, we sign what I call individual contracts at the local government level with the drivers concerned, with the drivers who are going to provide transportation for the movement of election personnel and election materials to the different polling units. So what the union does is to supervise their drivers that have been engaged. So for the Osun governorship election, for instance, what we did was that we embedded their officials both at the state level and at the local government level. So the moment there's a challenge in relation to a driver not performing or a driver not arriving on time, they intervene decisively to make sure that issue was addressed. The Federal Road Safety Commission also profiled these drivers in terms of who they are and also in terms of the type of vehicles they were supplying to the commission. So as at now, we keep our eyes on the ball. We have not removed our eyes from the union. We know that some of them have political affiliation, but we signed individual contract with each driver that is supposed to provide electoral services to the commission. It's a challenge, but we understand the level of that particular challenge, and we are dealing with that particular challenge using our own methods and using our own guidelines and regulations.
Yeah, so let's go to Osun now. I mean, we can't have this conversation without talking about Osun. And I mean, looking at the figures, yes, quite an improvement, I must say, looking at the percentage turnout of voters, 42%. I mean, that's way more than we've seen the usual 30%, the fluctuation. So quite commendable, and I think it speaks to the fact that more people are getting involved. But I also see that the rejected votes, over 18,000, and I mean, if the margin of victory was just about that, that means that this election will have gone to a rerun. So isn't that another major challenge for INEC?
Well, it's really not a major challenge for INEC. The conduct of election is a multi-stakeholder venture. What the law expects the Independent National Electoral Commission to do is to organize, undertake, and supervise election. In other words, that we should pay attention to the processes and procedures for the conduct of election. The task of mobilizing the voters, the task of getting people to know the logo and other paraphernalia of the different political parties still resides with the political parties. I think that it will not be it's not a good sign that up to this particular moment, some voters go to the polling unit and they cannot clearly identify the logo of their various political parties. But we have been doing our best, and civil society groups and organizations have been partnering with us in terms of making sure that voters know how to thumbprint and also know how to fold the ballot before putting it in the various ballot boxes. So we are going to continue to train voters. We are also going to continue to also train civil society groups and organizations in relation to what to do. And we're also going to continue to train political parties in relation to what to do. Let me just say this. I think that one of the major things that the political parties need to do for this particular electoral process is to make sure that they train their poll agents or party agents. A trained party agent or a trained poll agent is an asset to a political party. The era when political parties deploy political talks to the various polling units is gone. A poll agent must understand the issues in the Electoral Act 2022, must understand the processes and procedures of the Commission, must understand the workings of the beavers, and must also understand the result management in terms of our processes and procedures. So we want to plead with the political parties to train their poll agents to understand some of these processes and procedures. If they understand some of these processes and procedures, some of the small challenges we have at the level of collation of results, both at the polling unit level and at the RA level, will be obviated. So I think that is one of the key things political parties need to do going forward.
Back on the Osun election proper now, let's review the conversation on the positioning of the ballot box. I recall in a particular polling unit, I think somewhere in Irekwodun, and we reported it over the weekend, INEC officials were pressured following a disagreement between or amongst them and the electorate that they were not quite satisfied with the positioning of the ballot box. So INEC officials were now compelled to reposition it. I wonder if this, upon reflection, causes INEC to accept that the positioning of the ballot box far-flung in the open is not sacrosanct. It can be repositioned properly such that it can check vote buying. Also, going forward, if we're reviewing INEC's performance yet again, should there be, or will INEC be considering the placement of an enforcement officer to enforce the rule of not taking the phone to the voting booth such that vote buying can also be checked in future elections?
Well, on the first issue you raised, in relation to the positioning of the ballot box, Section 46, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act 2022 makes it mandatory that the ballot box must be placed in the full view of the voters and must be so placed till the end of voting. So when you see the ballot box placed in the full view of voters, that is in conformity with the provisions of the law. What the law says is that the Commission must carry out its processes in terms of open secret voting. Open secret, that you thumbprint in secret and vote in public, in the full view of everybody. But I think that one of the things we need to emphasize, and one of the things that needs to be done, is that the Commission needs to find a mode of engagement with the various state governments so that the facilities in the public facilities and in public schools that we use for purposes of election can be improved, so that we can emphasize the secrecy of voting in terms of the placement of the voting cubicles, but in terms of placement of the ballot box. The law says that the ballot box must be placed in the full view of people, so that everybody can see that somebody is voting and is only voting once. Not that you go and place the ballot box in a closet and somebody can stuff ballot papers inside his or her cloth and then dump them inside and then cause overvoting that will lead to the nullification of the election. So it's a bridge, it's a hybrid between protecting the secrecy of the ballot and also maintaining some level of transparency in the electoral process. I couldn't get your second issue properly.
Enforcing the rule of not taking the phones to the voting booth such that vote buying can be prevented.
Well, I think that will be a good idea. Trying to enforce the procedure of people not taking their phones into the voting cubicle or into the voting compartment. That was one of the things we emphasized to our ad hoc staff when they were being trained, that one of the assistant presiding officers should pay attention to that, and that any individual or any voter that insists on taking his or her phone to the voting cubicle, that the person can be arrested by the various law enforcement agencies at the level of the polling unit. But you know, the atmosphere in the various voting centers or polling units on election day sometimes is slightly different. We do not want to do anything that will lead to breakdown of law and order in any particular polling unit. So that is why we normally get the ad hoc staff to address the voters on the queue before the commencement of voting. But going forward, it is one of the issues we are going to consider, especially when we meet at the level of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security.
So concerning the results, you know, the processes that you put in place where people can monitor the results and see what's happening, quite interesting one. But why do we still need the collation center? Is this something that INEC is thinking about phasing out in the future since the results are all uploaded?
No, the law emphasizes what we call step-by-step collation of results. And the law emphasizes that the first step or the first stage of collation must be the RA collation center. So in terms of the collation of results, you must collect the results at the first level of collation. And this is at the level of the 332 registration areas of Osun State. Thereafter, it moves to the second level of collation, which is the local government collation, where the results from all the RAs, the 332 RAs, are brought to the 30 local government areas and collated before they move over to the state collation center. What is important and what is fundamental in this particular instance is that that bridge between the polling unit and the first level of collation, which is the RA, has been bridged. That has always been the big challenge. What happens between the collation, between the polling unit and the RA collation center? But now the results are uploaded direct from the polling units into our INEC result viewing portal, and almost all the political parties established their own situation room where they were also collating the results, polling unit by polling unit, RA by RA, and local government by local government. So it becomes next to impossibility for anybody to manipulate the result as it moves from one level to the other. So everything we are doing is in accordance with the law and also in accordance with our own regulations and guidelines that we design for the conduct of elections.
Well, just a few more questions for you,
but of this particular elections.
Okay, pardon me. I understand we need to go to a commercial break, Mark. My apologies, but we'll be back and get more on this in just a moment. Stay with us. So, welcome back. Ms. Okoye, what happens if an agent or someone, an official, refuses to upload the results from wherever they are?
That is a very, very serious matter. At the level of the polling unit, the moment the elections are over and the results or the votes are secured by the various political parties entered in Form EC8A, we have a registration area technical assistant who will assist in uploading the result of the election into the INEC result viewing portal. Now, if a presiding officer refuses to upload the results in the INEC result viewing portal using the BVAS, it's a very, very serious offense, and the Electoral Act has made it a very, very serious offense. And we did emphasize the consequences of any ad hoc staff trying to breach any of the provisions of the law in terms of the management of elections at the level of the polling unit, and also the management of results at the level of the polling unit. So we have registration area technical assistants. We also have supervisors supervising every registration area, and we also have monitors monitoring what the ad hoc staff are doing. So the moment elections are over in a particular polling unit, and after some time, if we have not seen the result, the RA supervisor and the registration area technical assistants and the monitors will definitely intervene to find out what the challenge is, and then we definitely deal with that challenge.
Well, I'm just wondering, you know, so the infrastructure you have put in place is such that you have to be voting simultaneously. I mean, in terms of voting has to have been concluded on the same day for people to be able to realize what has gone on, I mean, on the platform. And if that doesn't happen, that could be a pitfall for the structure that INEC has put in place. Are you putting safeguards in place to ensure that that is not compromised in any way?
Well, our structure, what we have put in place cannot be compromised. But you must also realize that in this country, we have, the various states have different topography. Some of the states, there are places, for instance, in Cross River, where you have to use human carriers in order to get to our polling units. There are places where you have to use motorbikes to get to our polling units. There are places that taxis can access.
And those usually are the pitfalls.
Yes. So you do not expect results to come in at the same time as results you have in the urban areas. So there's a possibility that in the urban areas, the results may come in on time. But in some of the remote areas, in some of the places with a very difficult terrain and difficult geography, the results will not come in on time. But we have also emphasized that, you see, when you deploy technology, you must also take into consideration the fact that technology can fail you. So if technology fails, we have trained our registration area technical assistants to intervene on time. Now, there's a possibility that there will be a gap between the time of intervention, between the time of the occurrence of the event and the time of intervention, and they may also delay the vote. But what the law has said is that a polling unit cannot close until the last voter on the queue has voted. So the implication is that if an election takes place on Saturday and the last voter has not voted up to Sunday, election must continue to go on. And so that's why you see, if you viewed our result viewing portal, you will see the differential times the results came in. But in relation to the Osun governorship election, by 10 p.m., over 98% of the results had already been uploaded into our result viewing portal. And I think that we will continue to improve with every election. We are not at the place where we want to be, but we will continue to improve with every election. And you can see the trajectory of improvements from the Edo governorship election to the Ondo governorship election to the Ekiti governorship election to Osun governorship election. And we believe that if we continue in this same trajectory, that by the 2023, some of the few challenges and some of the few loopholes will be plugged.
It's interesting you didn't mention Anambra. Maybe you forgot about
No, Anambra, the biggest
challenge.
Not biggest challenge. As far as we are concerned, the biggest thing we came away from in Anambra State was the fact that election held. So many Nigerians, there were so many people who believed that given the security challenges in Anambra, that the election will not hold. But the fact that that election held and that people came out to come and vote was a very big relief to the Nigerian people. We had challenges with the first election, and when we went to the second election in Hiala, we just obviated all those challenges we had and conducted a very good election.
So quickly, tell us about the exhumed voter cards. Do you have an update on that?
Well, I don't have any new updates. What we have done was that we have asked our state office in Rivers to liaise with the various security agencies to get to the root of this particular challenge. When that information broke, the first impression we had was that that thing took place in Imo State. And then thereafter, it shifted to Rivers. And then there are also some other videos that have emerged that we are also reviewing in terms of where the thing was found, on the circumstances under which it was found. But I'm not ready to go into details until we get a full report from our office in Rivers. But it is a very, very serious issue, and we are not taking it lightly. We are going to get to the root of it. If some people stage that particular incident, we are going to get to the root of it. If those materials emerge from one of our burnt offices or one of the offices where we had challenge, we are going to get to the root of it. If our staff compromise the integrity of our processes and traded with our those PVCs, we are going to get to the root of it. So we assure the Nigerian people that we are not going to sweep this matter under the carpet. We are going to get to the root of it. And at the end of the day, we inform Nigerians of our findings.
Okay, we have to leave it here. We have to thank you very much for coming on this morning. Mr. Festus Okoye is a National Commissioner and also the Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee at INEC.